I'm reminded, I just finished this book talking about what Americans, like Indians, but also just what was here, is sort of agriculturally gave to the rest of the world. And I'm reminded of the story about why beavers were so popular for trappers, and it's because the umbrella hadn't been invented yet, and everyone needed felt hats, and beavers were the only animals that had that, like the long fibers to make the felts for all the Europeans. And so that's why all the trappers got the beavers, is because Europeans needed for their top hats.
Well,
Um,
yeah, yeah. Hmm.
and so that's a long-winded way to ask you. There's a lot of wisdom from native peoples to be accessed, which may or may not be. What, if any, are you able to take from sort of like very traditional practices from sort of original populations?
Well, fascinating question. I think first of all, I think that you and I, unless you're a master herbologist or an herbalist, um, I think that probably native medicine had as much to offer as anything to know what medicinal plants were.
Yeah.
And I think that the Europeans, when they came, um, missed, or I say when we came, missed a golden opportunity. We were so hyped up on the apothecary that we did not appreciate the advantage of native herbal remedies that obviously the Native Americans enjoyed and have been practicing for a long time. So that's certainly one. It is just basic edible and medicinal plants. That was certainly one item. A second item was the management of the herds using fire. Stephen Pine wrote a book, Fire in America, that goes way back archaeologically and anthropologically back into early. And a lot of people, Disney has destroyed our psyche with Bambi and all that. Actually, except right during the fire, as soon as the fire passes, fire actually attracts wildlife because they want to come and lick the charcoal. They get minerals that way. And so the Native American, a lot of the burning that the Native Americans did was actually as a wildlife management tool to attract them to an area, freshen an area up. And it was attracted. In fact, my mentor, Alan Nation, who founded the Stockman Grass Farmer magazine, said that if you could have flown a drone over the United States, let's say 500 years ago, you would have thought the Native Americans were using electric fence on the bison because the fires never burned in a straight line. They would come up to an area and they had a real jagged edge. Well, the bison followed the fresh grass. They didn't want that old junk over there, and so they would follow this fresh grass. And so if you could have flown a drone over these massive herds of bison, 5 million, 6 million head, these herds of bison actually would have looked like they were being controlled by electric fence, the way they moved across that burned mosaic of the landscape without going into the unburned area. And then when the unburned area got up enough, then then they'd burn that. And fire was the Native Americans' chainsaw. That was the way they could actually control the trees and weed out the trees and make sure that the trees were good, that were growing. As a lover of trees and wood and forests, one of the most interesting things that I appreciate from the Native American is that the Native Americans' forestal economy was all about small stuff, not big stuff. And I mean, they didn't have chainsaws, right? In fact, they didn't even have steel. And so for a Native American, you walk up to a 3-foot diameter tree, that was pretty impregnable. What are you going to do with a 3-foot diameter tree? In fact, we have stories of entire, Indian villages spending like a week tending a fire around the base of a big tree, to bring it down. And so the whole village would be involved with, like, for a week of stoking this fire, bringing stuff to stoke this fire around the base of the tree. It finally burned through, and then the tree would fall over. And so the whole Native American forestal wood economy was based on little stuff: teepee poles, little dragging poles, sticks, and things that you could carry. And then the fire, which killed small stuff, diseased stuff, weak stuff, and kind of opened up the woods. In fact, the first Europeans who came to North America said that they could take a continental, that would be a European continental army, from the Atlantic coast to the Mississippi without ever needing a road, because the forests were not weedy, they were open. And this is where the permaculturalists have the idea of, we need more forests and fewer trees. Our forests are weedy, and that's why they're on fire. That's why they're burning, especially out west, because we're not cutting. We have a no cut policy on so many places that the load, before Europeans came, it's estimated that the Native Americans burned 4 million acres of California. Of course, it wasn't California back then, but they burned 4 million acres of California every single year. Think about that, 4 million acres. Well, from 1950 to 2000, only something like the figure's going to escape me, but it's under 500,000 acres a year burned in California. For 50 years, only 500,000 acres burned for 50 years, compared to what had happened for millennia up until then was 4 million acres. So you wonder why the West is on fire, we're burning up everything. It's because we have had this multi-decade no fire period of time, and the fuel loads have just built up to completely crazy proportions, and nature's going to last. I mean, those are fire. They respond to fire. You don't want to burn them every year, but fire is a tool, and the Native Americans use that very adeptly. So what I'm getting at with this forestal thing is, in that the pre-European forestal economy was all about using and burning and handling. The value was in small wood, not big wood. When the Europeans came with steel, with saws, they wanted boards. They wanted, and if you're going to cut lumber, if you're going to cut boards, you want big stuff, not little stuff. And so from a forest ecology standpoint, what has happened since the Europeans came is that we have taken the big, so the Native Americans took the little stuff and left the big stuff. The Europeans, we have taken the big stuff and left the little stuff. And so over time, we have reduced those great, cathedral trees, cathedral forests, and we have mongrelized our forestal genetics so much now that many foresters think we don't even have the genetics left to regrow those magnificent trees, that our ancestors, encountered on their first forays into that. So, that's look, the Indians didn't sit down one day and said, let's create a small forest economy. Nobody sat around and created a white paper, right, on doing this. It was just natural in them. But what it did, it for centuries and centuries, it selected, it incentivized healthy, beautiful big trees, and de-incentivized the little stuff. And today we incentivize the big healthy stuff, we harvest the big healthy stuff. Right. We're constantly culling out the big and healthy stuff and letting the junky stuff grow. And so our woods are becoming more and more weedy, by the year. It's kind of a long answer.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
A little but I find that perspective, that kind of stroll down history lane, and to realize, what it does when you accumulate that kind of management over an entire landscape, what an effect it has. It's huge.
Yeah.